So the first thing I want to talk to you about is the VFG. My guess is, and actually when I talk to most of you guys, you've never heard of the VFG. But the VFG is one of the largest photography associations here in Switzerland, and as you can read, well, we claim to be the creative part. There's not a large association here in Switzerland, just yes, which is more of the folky bit. Not sure if this is the right word for that, but these guys are definitely more on the, they're more on the business side and also provide much more on the business side. While we try to actually talk about the picture and make sense of the picture and try to get our knowledge of the photo itself a little bit better. The Association of Creative Photographers has roughly 270 members. We have two sections. One is the pool section, which has currently roughly 80 members. The pool section is for all the photographers that are in education, they still study, or they basically just started with their business and don't have a strong foothold yet in photography. The VFG is roughly, actually no, it turns 16 years old this year, and for photographers, 16 is actually a round number. The previous number was 11, so 16 is now a year for us to party. We have a further large party, or we plan to have a further large party towards the end of the year to celebrate our 16th birthday. If anybody wants to know why 16 is a round number, have a look at the lens, and then you see a couple of numbers there. The previous one was 11, the one before is usually 8. EBZ selection. We have a pretty strong association with the EBZ selection, primarily, or originally because it was called actually the Selection VFG, and it was initiated by members of our club. But with time, then the whole contest, the whole event actually got way too large for us to organize, so it got externalized to a company and is now organized by this guy over there, Romano Zabini, who does a fantastic job of organizing the contest, getting the sponsors for the hall, getting the photographers inside, and organizing most of the events that are actually running. The VFG still has, or still gives the mandate officially for the whole selection, so it is the creative driving force behind it, but the execution at the moment is all mostly in the hands of Romano over there. The VFG also sponsors, or still sponsors, half of one of the category prizes here. The other half is sponsored by the other large photography association here in Switzerland. This is pretty much the relationship from the VFG and the EBZ, which is also why we can actually be here at this hall, which is, I think, a fantastic venue and a large venue for all of us. Now I've talked about the VFG, I've talked about the venue, or the EBZ selection here. I think I need to talk a little bit something about me. Now, I myself am a photographer as well. I do have a photo studio in the old town here since 2007, so I'm actually I would call myself a fairly fresh photographer. I still freelance and contract as a user interface developer, software developer. This is also my background, so I came from the left field, so to go, into the photography field. I am a member of the VFG since 2008, and since this year I am secretary of the committee inside the VFG, which means I basically write all the protocols and take care of the archives, which, well, sometimes, well, that part is actually not that much fun, but being part of the whole thing is like. Now, being a photographer, or being inside the creative industry in general, I think it is quite hard to figure out, or clients have a hard time to figure out why do they need us? Why do they pay for us? Why are we worth the money that they get us, and why should they not just go to somebody else, or their uncle or their nephew who once read a book about logo design, or who just bought a new camera and clicks on the shutter? If you're following the Creative Mornings a little bit, Mike Montero had a talk, I think last month or 2 months ago, with the title, "Fuck You, Pay Me." There he explains primarily the whole reason of payment from a contractual perspective. But my clients usually don't come to me because I have nice contracts. They come to me because I actually do provide some kind of value, or they see that their uncle actually doesn't get the pictures done in a way that they need to or they should get done. So I think this is one reason for the title. Why am I worthy, or why are we worthy as professionals? What is the difference between us and the hobbyist? As with most things, in my opinion, it starts with this little sign over there, which is love. Or you tend to fall in love, you see something, you kind of look at it, you actually want to own it, it's pretty cool, and you want to be part of it, or you want to create something like that yourself. In my case, photography didn't come right away. I mean, I came quite late to photography, so I've been interested primarily in visual arts and the creative field from a design perspective, from a user interface design perspective. I've been painting and drawing a lot, but at one point the development business kind of took too much time away from me, and I didn't have time to, or I didn't have any outlet on that side of it. Then I tried to start painting and noticed it's actually quite difficult. And for some reason, I got a camera into my hands, and all of a sudden things started to click together. Something sparked. I mean, for me, the visual aspect comes together in photography. The people aspect, it is completely different from dealing with developer people or project managers. It's I have to admit also the technical aspect actually is quite interesting as I have a technical background. But all of a sudden, certain things come together, and I've noticed there is something for me. And what happened at that point is something started to grow. A flame started to or if I was lit, the flame started to light up, and I already often had the desire to actually create good photography for myself. This is quite important at this point, because I think in the beginning you primarily do it for yourself. It's a hobby. And with being in this passion phase or in this incubation phase or whatever you call it, the first thing you usually do is you buy equipment. This, of course, doesn't necessarily make you worthy right away, but you also start to study, you learn about what other people do, you book a workshop maybe, you go to a course, you read books, and you start to you create a base for everything you want to do, or for what you want to do. You start to dream about your project, you start to plan. I probably had sleepless nights where I just turned in my bed and started to create castles, destroy the castles I can, recreate new castles, and just had an idea of, wow, if I get there I can do this, or if this I can do that. I'm sure that most of you guys actually know this kind of feeling. Now, does this make me worthy as a photographer at this point? From a professional perspective? Not really. From a camera industry or equipment perspective, for sure. I mean, you've got the money, you've got the desire to create something, so you need the equipment, you buy the equipment. So from that perspective, as a consumer, you're absolutely worthy. But is your work worthy at that point? For yourself and your mother, yes. But I think for getting a certain peer review or a certain quality of standard that not just your mother can appreciate, it needs a lot more. What that usually is you start hard work. You create your first pictures, you create your first designs, you create, actually whatever you create, you've noticed, damn, it's actually quite hard. It's not as easy as it looks from the outside. It's not just picking up the camera and pressing the shutter. The pictures just don't look like I imagined them. They just don't look like I see in the magazines. They don't look like what I see here on the walls. There's much more to it, and I have no clue what it is. So you start to work on it a lot more. One example for this is, or one example, if you don't have a camera, then one example is cooking recipes. I mean, everybody, I'm sure that most people had a look at the cookbook. The pictures look fantastic. The description sounds delicious. So you run to the shop, you buy the ingredients, and you get going. Now, in the process of your cooking or baking, you do put something in here. Maybe you put everything together really according to instructions. Maybe you add a little more of that ingredient, maybe a little less of this ingredient. But at the end of the day, the meal or the cake that you baked, it doesn't really look like the one on the picture in there. If you're lucky, the taste is in the direction that you imagined it, but usually it's not exactly there. And so you start the whole process again. You go to the shop, you try little different ingredients, maybe a different brand, maybe from a different shop. Where vary the cooking times. You basically start to, you kind of get comfortable with the whole process. You get to know a little bit of the craft, let's put it like this. And with this craft, in the beginning, it might not look that great. So the results in the start are a lot of broken nails, a lot of nails that are not actually in the board. But with this work, you get a certain repeatability of what you do. Repeatability and quality, or the quality of your repeatable results, the quality of your results are fairly repeatable now in a safe environment. In a safe environment, I mean, you know your own tools, you know your kitchen, you know the friends that you invite, you know who you cook for, all these kind of things. And even if the first meal isn't as great, the second meal might be better, the third meal, well, if it's a new recipe, then it might be bad again or not as good. But with time and time, you get to a certain level where you can repeatedly cook for your friends, and your friends actually ask you to, oh wow, that's a little too loud, ask you to create results for them. In the photography business, this is kind of obvious. They start to ask you to take pictures of themselves, of their kids, maybe even of their wedding, although personally I don't recommend that right from the start at this point. Things get comfortable. So with the repeat results, although they also have one large part of you actually. They make you realize that things are running good, and they fuel your own passion for the whole thing. So this means that you can actually go back and, hey, I've created something great. You go back and create something great again, which is kind of a circle. At this point, are you worthy? I think yes. From a quality perspective, you definitely can produce good quality work. There's nothing against that. But this type of work is still in a very safe environment. You know the left and right, you know where the things are basically, you know where you stand at this point. And this is also where in my opinion, there's a choice that you have to that usually gets along. It's the choice that do I want to keep it as a hobby and keep it as a passion and drive just on the side with this and fuel maybe all the frustrating work that I have during the day in the office. Or do I want to make this passion now my business? There was a blog entry on signal versus noise from 37 Signals, I think this week or last week, which said, where the title was, focus on process and not on passion. One sentence in there, a quote is, turning a passion into business is a good way to kill your passion. This actually is absolutely true, because when you want to make it into business, it's not just the safe environment anymore. All of a sudden, all the crap stuff that comes along with it, all the administration, all the paperwork, writing bills, writing offers, writing estimates, even cleaning the toilets, cleaning the studio, dealing with the clients. Well, this is one part is not always fun, and actually can kill a lot of the productivity that we in the creative industry work with. But nevertheless, if you do it as a business, even if the environment is not as ideal as you would like it, you actually have to produce quality work. Your clients demand that. If it's just a hobby, you can always have an excuse. Well, it's my hobby, what do you expect? I mean, maybe you get paid for it, but usually you don't, so there is a high risk attached to if you hire somebody that just takes it as a hobby. Just from a quality point of view. If you choose to go further and make it a business, then boy, things go up and down. You get thrown around. Because now you do get thrown into the cold pond, the cold water. It is tough sometimes. You have to leave your comfort zone. You automatically do if you do it for clients. I mean, one of my first weddings that I did as a professional, I came back from a long trip on a train, or from a train trip, a night train trip from Venice, right to the wedding location. I obviously was not in a very super mood. One reason for it, well, after that I left my flashes in the hotel room. The wedding location was too far away to go back to grab the flashes, so I had to take the whole wedding without a flash, which, as a fairly newcomer, well, it was a pretty interesting experience. You start to think about, well, you start to work and sweat a lot more all of a sudden just because, where's the light? And in dim light conditions, it got quite hard and difficult to make a couple of interesting pictures. But somehow I had to wing it. The client demands, and then after all, either during the day you try to point the people into the right light or under the right light, or you just bring it in post-production. That's the other part that you can do. But you somehow have to make a good picture, no matter what. You can't restage the wedding. Or usually you can. Sometimes I heard that people can, but I wouldn't want to run that risk in that sense. But this experience is a tremendous advantage towards the people who just keep it as their hobby. They will never have that pressure that we have to do this kind of work. And they will never have to kind of make a good face even if the whole situation is not as optimal, put it like this. But one result of being thrown into this cold pond is the results that you go back to your studio, you look at your results and you see, damn, it kind of looks like the beginning again. There's much more broken nails than straight nails in the wood. So you start to lose confidence in yourself and you ask yourself, am I actually worthy? It's a difficult, well, it's not that difficult, but the problem, I think there's two problems. I ask myself that a lot of times. I mean, a lot of times I come back from the session, I look at the pictures, and there's so many times I'm just sitting in my chair and thinking, what was I thinking during the day? I mean, these pictures are just not worth it. Then you go through the whole thing, or I sweep over the whole thing, and you start to filter down, you start to work on it, and all of a sudden you realize, actually, they're not that bad, and for two reasons. One reason is, well, you compare yourself on a completely different level nowadays than as a hobbyist. As a hobbyist, you see things different than how you see them now. You got a lot more exposure to what your industry produces. You got a lot more exposure to what your peers produce, and this exposure is usually on a lot higher quality or on a higher quality level than what you've produced before. So what you look at now, or what you see now all of a sudden, is that the products, the results that you are good, fairly good from a client's perspective, but they're not really good for yourself, or at least not necessarily too good for myself if I compare them to others, to people, to my peers that actually produce fantastic work that I think are worthy in that sense, and that I ask myself, am I worthy to walk in their shadow as well? I think this shadow is a quite important aspect of the whole thing. So the worthiness part comes in two aspects, or in two flavors. The left-hand side there is basically the worthiness from a religious perspective, as in, am I worthy to walk amongst my peers in that sense? And the other aspect is also from the worth perspective, is the work that I produce worth the money that I get for it? According to my experience, it usually is. I criticize myself a lot more than I probably need to, but I always have my role models or something like this, and I always have a hard time getting in contact with those role models. Personally, because I always judge my work on these role models as well, it's not that easy to figure out, does this person actually do I have something to give to that person as well? Am I worthy to even get their feedback? Am I worthy to walk around them and breathe their air in a way? The other part is the money part. The money part is divided into a couple of sections again. One is all the experience that you've actually gained as a professional. And this experience is tremendous, in my opinion. Yeah, as I said before, you get thrown a lot, you have to produce results, even if the time is not good, you're not in a good mood, the client is not in a good mood, the conditions are not right. But this experience gives you the ability to react according to in these difficult situations. It gives you also the ability, and this is quite important, to say no. Because saying no sometimes means, if you want a certain quality or type of quality of work, I need to have a certain type of condition as well. I can recognize that this condition is not adequate for the type of work that I want to produce. And saying no at this point and saying, now you have to either move it to a different location or do a different time, or then set certain expectation levels on the client side, is something you also only get from experience, I think, or from my perspective. I think it's not that easy to say no in general, but it is something where you have to have a certain self-confidence, which builds up by the experience. So, 20 minutes are gone. Okay, so do I think, are we worthy? I think so. I think as a professional, we are always worthy. It's much more important, or the client does not see this, but it's important for us to explain to the client as well why we are worthy and why it's worth the money to the client to come to us and not just ask their relatives to do the job that we'd like them for them, because the money that we earn at the end of the day has this risk premium built in that we gained from our experience, from the experience in that sense. And in that perspective, I round it up in this case, and the only thing I can say is, have a nice day, go and create things worthy of yourself and of your industry, and don't forget to get paid accordingly and worthy of your work as well. Thank you very much. I think so, yeah. Yeah, I would say so. If you don't have any experience, well, I'm just talking about not your personal worthiness as a person, I'm just talking about the worthiness within your peers and your work. And their experience is, I think, the major part. I don't know who it is, so But no, I think that's not the way to work as a professional either. I mean, if you want to get work, you have to make it easy for clients to contact you as well. I mean, I fall into this fallacy a little bit as well because my studio has a sign and it says closed all the time. Opening times completely random because I'm not in the studio all the time either. But at least I have an email address in there and I have a telephone number on there. Yeah. So if they want to contact me, then they can call me or they can email me. But I think just if you want to contact me, then please write me a letter. It's not really right or the professional approach of doing this. I actually think that limitations start your creativity a lot as well. So because once limitations are part of the cold water as well, because all of a sudden you need to think outside the box, and this is where actually the creative stuff comes from a lot of times. You might not realize in the beginning, it is always stressful. I mean, if I have a wedding and it rains, it's kind of, oh, no, again, not again. I would love to have a nice, sunny, cloudy weather. A little bit cloudy is always good for photography, but you have to deal with it at the end of the day. So you take the client into places where there is light, or you have to then start to think on the spot about how can I change that situation into something that is more favorable towards me, towards the outcome as well, within that time frame, of course. And sometimes there are times where even in the studio, the client comes in and the client is in a bad mood. I need to make a good portrait of the client, and within that hour, it's just not possible. And I usually notice that fairly quickly. 15, 20 minutes into the whole thing, and I tend to ask the client, do I want to go on? Do we want to actually go on or not? Because I think at that point, I can save the money, I can save the client money, and I can save myself time for that session and move the session to somewhere else. But in the studio, this is workable. There's sometimes occasions where you cannot really do that. Does that answer the question? Well, I think the no comes from two perspectives. One is, yes, we all need money, but we also need money from work that we want to do, and we at the end still like to work to fuel a little bit of passion. And B, if I produce bad work right now and have a client that is not happy with what I produce, then the money that might actually not come in with the next client, because this client then goes around and tells everybody else, this guy produces shit work. So saying no at this point is much more advantageous for both of you. Or, well, say no, I usually don't say no directly, but I might recommend the person another photographer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, of course, saying no is also a risk if you're very short of money right now. But, yeah, I think we all go a bit through tough times anyway. How do I balance working on client projects and my personal project, which actually fuel the passion again and fuel my energy? It's a very good question. I have to admit that at the moment for the last half year, I haven't had time to actually work on prior projects. There's so many things going on. But usually I there's at least 2 or 3 times in the year where I book myself time off from my clients, where I go somewhere and then take pictures over there, where I follow my hobby on the photography side. And I think we have to do this because the private side, or the hobby side of that profession is as important as the professional side. And the hobby side gives you a different perspective again for client work. And who knows, these pictures that you have there might actually fuel or bring in another income like that. So, but I tend to book 1 or 2 weeks off at least, in the year to do things. Previously, or before I had so much to do or going on, I had 1 or 2 days in a week that I actually went out with the car into the landscape and took pictures there for myself and just for myself. But it has to be on your appointment, on your agenda, I think, on my photography. Yes? I mean, yeah, well, there's a couple things in there. One is artist versus business, the artistic work versus commercial work. And I actually agree, these are two different beasts. Artist work is always, or should be, part of yourself. Whatever you produce as an artist is purely what you produce for yourself. And if somebody likes it, very good, you might buy it. If he doesn't like it, who cares? It's what you produce. It satisfies you in the first place. Well, commercial work is from the other end. In commercial work, you actually have to satisfy a client. If you can satisfy yourself as well, even better. And I think most of us can somehow manage both a little bit. But artists have different proposition or have different base than commercial. And what was the other bit was studio, we had all the administrative stuff. The problem with us is that we are usually very small businesses. And if you're small, you have to deal with a lot of stuff. And there's no way around, I just can't pay someone full-time to keep track of the cleanliness of my studio, let's put it like this. Or, yeah, all the small little things. So, and this all adds up, and this time has to be charged somehow as well. So it has to be calculated in your rate. And this is something you have to actually do for yourself in that sense. Thank you. So,